Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'm thrilled to invite you to join us for a special 5-part podcast series I'm doing with Alyssa DeSimone. We are going to take a deep dive into a new component of the California Consumer Privacy Act, which focuses on automatic decision makers and automatic decision making technology. So, Alyssa, first of all, welcome to the podcast series.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much, Tom, for inviting me. Really excited to talk about this new emerging area.
Yes, this is literally cutting edge because it goes into effect on October 1. And although it's a California law, I think its scope will be much broader than the state of California. Also, with all things under the California Consumer Privacy Act, it is leading the nation, so many states may mimic it. So maybe could we start with Alyssa explaining what this new set of regulations applies to, and what is an automatic decision maker?
Yeah, so it's going to apply to most employers, really. It's going to apply to employers who have 5 or more employees. And that's not going to be exclusive to employees in the state of California. It's actually going to include employees who are outside of the state of California, as long as that employer is a covered entity within California. And it doesn't only include full-time employees as well. So you've got job sharing, part-time employees. It's really about within that employer's regular scope of work that they do. So let's say it's a seasonal farm. If within that season, they regularly employ in each position 5 or more employees in a job sharing or a part-time, that's going to count as a covered entity. And maybe they have remote workers who are outside the state. That's also going to make them a covered entity. And then for the perspective of what that automated decision system is, it's really anything that replaces or substantially replaces human decision making. And that can go anywhere from reviewing resumes, performance evaluations, productivity monitoring, something that's going to influence impactful decision making in day-to-day life of employees or people. So we have, even for example, personality quizzes. I think we've all applied to positions where we've had that personality test. And that's also going to be a significant factor in the automated decision making.
Alyssa, what if I work remotely in the great state of Texas for a California corporation, or the decision-making system is located in California? Does this new law cover me?
It doesn't necessarily cover employees who are outside of California unless the decision making is occurring in California. And it's a little bit of a gray area there, but essentially, if the decision making is occurring in California and that entity is using a system in California, that's where the protections are going to occur.
So let's maybe walk through some of the basics of the hiring process. I think most people are going to be familiar with it. Starts with a resume submitted to either an entity or a potential employer. What happens, or how does this law apply at that point? Does it literally, that first cut, you didn't go to a top 5 college, you didn't graduate in the top 5%, you didn't have all A's. If there's an immediate cut, is there a implication of the law?
I really think that there could be, because the way that it reads, it could have to do with if the automated decision making system is basing it without human oversight, and it's anything that could have to do with a protected class in the state of California, there really could be those implications there.
Now, you mentioned the word protected class. Can you explain to our audience what that is and how the protected class is covered or implicated by this law?
Yeah, so we've got Title VII, right? That's the federal level. And then, so that's anything from, we've got gender, sexual orientation, national origin, race, and so on. Like, we have those federal level protected Title VII classes. And then each state is going to have potentially their own protected classes In California, I've worked in HR for near a decade now. We like to call it treat like its own country, because California has pretty much the most extensive protected classes. And if there's anything that could be perceived as discrimination against those protected classes, that's really what we're looking for here in the automated decision systems.
So as we move through the hiring process, how do you see some of the decisions that could be made by an automated decision system or an automated decision making system come into play? We've talked about sort of the first pass on a resume. If someone programs the AI or other ADS to only look for certain parameters, is that oversight, or does oversight have to occur after the decision is made?
It really needs to occur while that decision is being made, I would say. It needs to be, if the decision-making system has made it, the human oversight needs to go in and look at how that decision is being made by the automated decision system. Like you said, the programming is being done by a human. There could be that bias that occurs by the human programmer. So really, you need to have someone reviewing why that decision was made, how it's maybe doing ranking. For example, if there are knockout questions, how are those knockout questions being created and how are they being determined by the system? And then do they have any type of a disparate impact or potential disparate treatment in the end that apply to any of those federal level protected classes or a state or level protected class?
What about, so say I have Fox Energy Corporation and I want to outsource this part of my hiring process to a workforce, to a resume.com, to even a LinkedIn. Does that absolve me of liability, or am I responsible for the actions of a third party I might hire to help me in this process?
Yeah, so this is very clear that you cannot avoid liability by using any type of a third party or vendor. You really do need to make sure that you're reviewing contracts, you're speaking with third parties, doing that due diligence to ensure that no illegal or actions are being taken by that third party or vendor, which would violate this new law. You really can't hide behind and say, oh, we weren't aware that the third party was using an automated decision making system or this technology that then was a violation here. We're hands off. They really are liable for having those discussions, asking what systems are being used, and if there's full compliance with all the different areas of this new regulation.
What if I'm one of those vendors and I operate domestically across the US so that I can provide my hiring services or my hiring service package to a wide variety of companies literally across America, but I include the state of California or people from the state of California? Do I now need to, first of all, can I carve California out, or would that just be, in your opinion, an administrative nightmare?
I really feel that would be an administrative nightmare, especially in my experience. I've done all kinds of implementations on the back end from hiring systems, and it would really be, in my opinion, a best practice to make an effort to implement across all of the company's practices to meet these standards, because you have a very large population that this might affect, and you may be accidentally, without even realizing, violating these regulations or these laws. So if you're going to, instead of worrying, is there going to be an applicant or is there going to be someone who slips through the system, it may be easier to just look, where do we need to take the appropriate actions and apply it to the entire system? And you have that protection. You've done that due diligence, or at least made the effort to do that and demonstrating that.
What do you suggest if we maybe flip the perspective to a corporate compliance office, an HR office, an in-house HR office? What do you suggest they do to implement standards so that a company utilizing one of either these vendors or a direct hiring campaign through through LinkedIn or some other mechanism, that they comply with the law?
Well, you're going to want to review everything. You're going to want to do a risk assessment, any risk identification. You're going to want to review standard operating procedures, have those discussions and ask, where does the risk lie? What industry are you in? And then review all of your different processes and procedures. And also, if you're using any third parties, if you're using any vendors, look at the contracts that you have and do an audit. Audit those systems, put the audits in place, review the outcomes of those audits, and then implement any training as well that needs to occur with those third-party vendors, HR individuals, and members of management as well.
So you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I didn't pick up on it at the time, which is this does not simply apply to the start of the hiring process or even early on in the hiring process. I think it would apply throughout the hiring process. And you mentioned personality tests or other types of tests that a corporation may give to a potential candidate. How does this law relate to these tests that probably multiple of us have taken multiple times over our hiring and career?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think of with personality tests and protected classes, I think of things like ADA and like neurodivergency. That became those who weren't maybe aware of it during the pandemic, many people became aware of the mental health and mental illness aspect or neurodivergency in general. Personality tests can be one of those areas where there's potentially that disparate impact. And screening for personality tests, anyone who has worked internally from a HR perspective and either seen how personality tests work and the impacts that they can have, they look almost like a chart. And if someone takes that test and doesn't fit that perfect chart, they may automatically be screened out from any further consideration in a hiring process. And if an automated system is doing that without human oversight to kind of look more into a person or the reason why, that could have discriminatory implications on someone's opportunity to get a job. So from a personality test perspective, I think it's about bringing awareness to it and seeing where do we have that human oversight there.
So is there any notice requirement or pre-use notice requirements under the law that you have seen that companies must let potential employees know that they may be using ADMT or ADS?
Yeah, so there is a pre-use notification requirement that will go into effect. And really it's how are they using it? There has to be an opt-in or opt-out, letting employee or potential applicants, I would say, know what their rights are, that they can opt in, opt out. If they do choose to take those actions, whether opt in or opt out, if they are going to opt into using it, how is that data being used? Why is it being used? One of the areas that is very reminiscent of other laws like HIPAA to me is the right to correct. So once you have maybe access to that data or know how that data is being used, if maybe it's incorrect, being able to correct that information that they have on you. Those are just some areas of pre-notification.
So unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. I hope our listeners will join us for part 2, where we looked at opt-in and opt-out requirements. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted any more information on yourself or to connect with you, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
Yeah, so if you wanted to connect with me or talk further on any of these topics, my LinkedIn is the best place that you can reach out to me for any professional or other discussions. It's just my name, Alyssa DeSimone, and just go ahead and search me on LinkedIn.
Alyssa, thank you, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.